Greetings from Toronto, Canada, ladies and gentlemen. And it's good morning here, and it's good evening, late afternoon in Brussels. Tourism is a significant part of many national economies, and the immediate and immense shock to the tourism sector has been significant due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The world's tourism sector could lose at least 1 trillion or 1.5% of the global gross domestic product, having been placed at a standstill for nearly 4 months due to the pandemic. The loss could rise to 2.2 trillion or 2.8% of the world's GDP if the break in international tourism lasts for more than 8 months. In the most pessimistic scenario, a 12-month break in international tourism could result at a 3.3 trillion or 4.2% of the global GDP. Tourism is an important part of the European economy. It generates foreign exchange, supports local and regional development and culture. Travel and tourism services contribute about 10% directly and indirectly to EU gross national product, or slightly less if direct contributions alone are taken into account. Tourism is a significant part of the employment at an average of 4.4% of the GDP, 6.9% of the employment, and tourism is a very important sector for providing jobs for women and young people. Many jobs in tourism are seasonal, part-time, and temporary. A majority of tourism enterprises are also micro, small, and medium-sized, and all of which are heavily affected. As reported, that international tourist arrivals in Europe were down 66% in the first half of 2020. Over the same period last year, with a 97% drop in the second quarter. Talking to us about this and more, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me immense pleasure and honor to invite to our recovery town hall Jeniffer Iduh, Head of Research, European Travel Commission. Welcome, Jeniffer.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let's get started. Established in 1948, the European Travel Commission is a unique association in the travel sector representing the national tourism organizations of the countries of Europe. ETC is co-organizing together with the European Commission a weekly ad hoc formal network to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on tourism and the response required by both public and private sectors. Could you please elaborate on the role of the engagement with EU policymakers and stakeholders?
Since the outbreak began, the organization has been closely monitoring the evolution and the impact of the pandemic on the European tourism industry. We have been working very closely with the European Commission and also with other key stakeholders to alleviate this impact and support the recovery of the tourism sector in Europe. We have also combined efforts with our associate members and also tourism partners to provide not only ETC members, but the wider industry with intelligence and also with data-informed insights with the aim of supporting NTOs and DMOs in Europe to get through this crisis during the pandemic and also after the pandemic. So essentially, our ultimate goal is to support destinations in their path to recovery and also help them in their efforts to build, let's say, a more resilient and sustainable tourism environment.
Okay. And thank you very much for that very comprehensive response. According to the facts and figures of the first 6 months of 2020, international tourist arrivals start to recover in July, and they were strengthening progressively in the second half of the year, but at a slower rate than previously foreseen at 60%. International tourist arrivals started to recover in September and then strengthened progressively. Now we are going to the last quarter of the year. It is predicted that international arrivals will recover in December based on the limited recovery before the end of the year. Is that your perspective as well?
There is still increased uncertainty about the outlook of the tourism sector in the middle of this global health crisis. And this uncertainty very much depends on downside risks like the evolution of the virus, whether there would be a vaccine available soon or not, the risk also of further lockdowns because of second waves of infections, travel restrictions. The list could be longer, also low consumer confidence and the global economic recession. And although we did see a pickup in tourism activity over the summer period when destinations were lifting travel restrictions, the first half of the year, tourist arrivals to Europe were down 66% compared to last year, as you correctly pointed out. The picture is not promising for the near future, and the shape of the recovery is also still not clear, whether it would be a V shape like we have seen in previous crises, or whether this would be a U-shaped recovery. Our latest reports indicate unprecedented falls in international tourism this year, and although we might see a rebound in the world's tourism economy next year, we don't expect to go back to 2019 levels until 2023. So essentially, the fundamental nature of tourism has changed, and gone are the days where growth was an indicator of success for destinations. So now is the time for us to reinvent the sector and focus on aspects like quality, value, innovation, and this is essentially how we see the future of the tourism industry.
Right. And Jeniffer, that's very profound, right? Because at one point in the middle of the year, a lot of countries thought that the worst is behind us, and they were even talking about those corridors between Europe, between some of the European countries and even some countries outside Europe. But there was an experiment also conducted between Spain and England, and we all know what happened there. So I think the outlook seems to be bleak, to say the least. So I agree with your assessment there. So in the process of tourism recovery, people want to have a chance to get some well-needed rest and relaxation and fresh air. As soon as the health situation allows, people should be able to catch up with friends and families, at least in their own EU country or across the borders, with all the safety and precautionary measures needed in place. Can you share the information on key measures of travel restrictions, borders, and quarantine measures that are being applicable and or could be in the future?
Well, as we have discussed now, over the summer we saw how there was a recovery in travel demand, and this was just a signal that people are enthusiastic about traveling again. But it's also true that there was a lot of confusion about quarantine measures and testing procedures and border restrictions, and all of this together led to a sort of confusion, not only for travelers, but also for tourism businesses. And at the European Travel Commission, we have been very straightforward with our message since the beginning, and we will continue to stress that it's very important to establish a common criteria across Europe when it comes to implementing travel restrictions. And this is both at a European level and at an international level. So our belief is that closing borders within EU or within the Schengen area, and also stringent quarantine measures or travel advisories recommended not to travel to or within Europe, are definitely not an effective way to fight the pandemic. What is essential to limit the spread of the virus right now is to put in place thorough testing and tracing systems, implementing social distancing and sanitary measures, and even more importantly, information sharing among destinations. And as the winter season is now approaching, it is very important and crucial that we show this time a more coordinated approach among European destinations. And I mean, only this way we'll be able to, first of all, restore travelers' confidence and also support the gradual recovery of the sector, and definitely support also the millions of businesses and jobs that have been heavily impacted by this crisis. And also in the same line, the European Commission has proposed a new set of recommendations on how to coordinate these travel restrictions in Europe. And this is an initiative that the European Travel Commission fully supports. And we also encourage EU member states to follow these recommendations to support the recovery of the European tourism industry.
So what I'm hearing is that this pandemic is really not going away anytime soon. But we have to learn to live with it in a lot of ways. So it's smart travel, with precautions. Information dissemination here is very important by the governments within the travel sector. I think that's the key to it. Okay, so moving forward, the impact of the virus on the tourism industry, as we've discussed already, is massive. And with some parts of the segments more affected than the others. Most tourist facilities were closed during the peak of the crisis, and the events cancelled or postponed. Tourism businesses are also among the last to resume activities. Even if they do, they still have to apply strict health protocols, as you've just mentioned, and containment measures, meaning that they can operate only at restricted capacity that spreads across restaurants, hotel capacities, venues, and so forth. Some EU countries and regions have been hit worse than the others, namely those hardest hit by the pandemic and more dependent on tourism, such as Italy, Spain. Countries that are later in easing travel restrictions and reopening tourism activities are also likely to be hit harder. Which is the most affected tourism segment by the virus?
It is a reality that the tourism sector has benefited from substantial business tourism. MICE Travel has actually played a very important role in terms of tourism revenues because some of the highest spenders are actually MICE travelers. And in the last months, we have seen how many of these major tourism events have been cancelled, postponed, or they've taken place virtually. Business travel in this sense and the MICE industry overall have been some of the the hardest hits compared to leisure travel. And business travel, we know that it will recover at a much slower pace. And the recovery of this particular segment is crucial and very important for the recovery of the sector as a whole. And another reality is that despite all these events have been taking place with the most advanced technologies and digital platforms, they will still not be able to replace the value that is brought by face-to-face gatherings.
Right. And I'm so glad, Jennifer, you've mentioned about MICE because or business tourism or business travel, because very few people talk about it. Very few people are even focused upon it, and I actually come from the meetings industry. So I'm very heartened to hear that at least within EU that's being identified as a sector most hit, they are high spenders. Absolutely, you are right there. And I've been conducting my town halls and with few of the stakeholders, and there's a real worry and concern. But there's also a bit of a borderline concern that events are going virtual. So therein lies an opportunity as well. But is that the future of events going forward? What happens to these larger Goliath convention centers, for example, But I think the future is blended events. I think nothing can replace still the face-to-face meetings. What do you think about that?
What is the reality is that technology has driven the digitalization of most organizations during this crisis. And it's also served, we've seen in the last months, it also helped NTOs to broadcast, for example, virtual tours through their destinations. And this allowed them to not only interact with potential travelers, but also build an emotional connection and inspire them for when it's possible to travel again. But as we've mentioned already, it's true that we humans are social beings and we cannot survive if it's not through social interactions, cooperations. We do learn from each other. And this is why I mentioned earlier that the virtual world is not yet able to replace the value that is brought by human interactions and experiences. And actually, most travelers today now want to go slower. When they travel, they want to get immersed in the local culture and engage with local communities. They're looking for deeper and richer experiences when they go out. They want to enjoy nature and outdoors, historical sites, or even creative city escapes. And although these virtual experiences can give a sense of what this might look like, they're still not able to replace these experiences as such.
Yeah, and it doesn't replace being able to look in somebody's eye and a handshake, and you are absolutely right. The crisis is also changing tourist behavior. While some tourists prefer to postpone their trips, 80% of the respondents surveyed were ready to resume traveling to Schengen countries within the first 3 months of borders reopening. What is the trend you are saying? What is your data showing you on the consumption post-COVID-19?
So we've collected, or we've seen from summer data on bookings and searches, and also from recent surveys that we have conducted on travel intention, that people are willing to travel, and especially among Europeans, and this is actually a crucial first step. The picture is slightly different when it comes to long-haul source markets who are still hesitant about traveling to Europe. And actually, our latest research on travel sentiment among Europeans showed that there is a growing interest in traveling closer to home, so domestically or within Europe. And this is mainly for leisure and visiting friends and relative purposes. And results also show that the type of activities that are highly in demand are closely related to nature and outdoor experiences, also sun and beach holidays, and city trips. Other relevant insights that we found were that aspects like quarantine measures and change in travel restrictions, the rising numbers of COVID-19 cases, are some of the travelers' primary concerns. So what is important for them right now is flexibility when it comes to, for example, cancellation policies, and also reassurance that it's safe to travel. So what they're basically looking for now is peace of mind. So destinations right now need to reduce this uncertainty, and we need to actively share information about travel restrictions and health and safety measures. And restoring travel confidence right now is one of our main responsibilities. And here there are two key elements that are very important, which are reassurance and adaptation. So reassuring and adapting our products and travel experiences to the new normal, and also to the needs of these travelers, and also ensuring that it is safe to travel again.
Okay, so you said adaptation and basically, okay. All right, and again, you are spot on that, because if you don't adapt, the people will not be reassured, because there is so much information now out there. People are generally, the travelers are well informed of what the situation is, and they do want some level of adaptation to come in. It cannot be how things were in the past. So adaptation, and the organizations who will adapt fast will be nimble, and are the ones who will be there perhaps in 2023. So I think adaptation and reform and rethinking travel and tourism is critical. I agree with you there. So beyond the urgent requirement to restore livelihoods and ensure that travelers can move freely and safely, in the coming months present a potential unique opportunity, like we've just talked about, reform, or to reset, or to rethink tourism strategies and perhaps funding models put forward in tourism in Europe on a more sustainable path. For the European Travel Commission, the goal is for Europe's NTOs to lead in developing a new sustainable tourism ecosystem, or expressed in different terms, to make Europe the most sustainable destination in the world. From this goal, what is the recovery path for tourism in terms of sustainable development? Could you please elaborate on it?
So we believe that more than ever before, it is very important right now to ensure tourism's long-term sustainability. We need to support all the businesses that have been heavily affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we need to work together to build a sector that is more resilient to future crises. Destinations have now a very important role to lead the way to this, let's say, transformation or transition of the sector. And already before the pandemic, there were many NTOs that were reshaping their tourism industries, tourism strategies, sorry, to embrace approaches that were more sustainable and that were more focused on finding the benefits or try to have an equal benefit for travelers, for local economies and local communities, and also the environment. And there are, for example, very good cases in the Netherlands or in Flanders. And this pattern has actually become even more apparent in the aftermath of the pandemic. We do believe that shifts like this will require a reassessment of KPIs, new tourism policies, and that we cooperate even much more than we used to do before at a local, a regional, at a national, and at a pan-European level. So this sustainable approach is also in line with the European Travels Commission new marketing strategy, which is focused on putting at the forefront people's interests and then attracting the right visitor. So we have now moved from a volume-based to a value-based approach, whereby our traditional market segmentation is no longer based on demographics, and it's based more on people's behaviors, interests, and attitudes of specific niche travelers.
Right. So we're going more towards more immersive tourism, where you really, so more tailor-made solutions, perhaps. So I guess that old cookie cutter model is not going to work anymore. Okay. So the EU has acted to support the tourism sector, whether by temporarily changing EU rules, helping to interpret current rules, or by providing much needed financial support. Coronavirus Response Instrument Initiative, CRII, has allowed national governments to mobilize unused structural funds budgets for various purposes, including to support tourism business. What does the European Travel Commission support for its members from this initiative?
As I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, we've been always there since the beginning, guiding our members through the path of recovery. We've collected data. We have made a series of webinars, establishing cooperation with EU institutions to be able to support our members, and also guiding them through the right path, following the directions of the European Commission in some instances.
Okay, all right. The Commission recommended member states open borders to travelers from outside the EU in 3 phases, subject to certain preconditions, such as countries having similar epidemiological situations, guaranteeing enough healthcare and testing capacity, and having contact tracing systems in place. The Commission also recommends re-establishing tourism services gradually in coordination and non-discriminatory way. It also recommends using online solutions as much as possible, going virtual, going digital. Is that the future of the travel experience?
The future of the travel experience in the sense of going virtual, or?
Well, it will be, so there is a sense that, what will be happening is that, okay, that you cannot anymore rely just on travel agents. Okay, so a lot of bookings are being done online today, and people are seeking information online as well. So again, it's about the digital world, AI, VR, around the entire travel experience. Is that the future, to facilitate your booking process, or to live through that process?
The idea is always to make the path to purchase easy for travelers and potential travelers. And it's a reality that people are going more digital. They're more technologically savvy. So we need to adapt to the new trends that are brought by consumers as well. I think it's inevitable that whether we want or not, we need to adapt to these changes, and we need to be early adopters and go digital in this sense.
Okay. And I think the pandemic has kind of enforced that. They're saying the development that has happened is happening right now in AI, in VR, within the travel industry, is something we've captured now. What we would have taken place in the next 5 years has happened in the past 5 months. It's been very, very rapid, the adaptation there. Every crisis creates an opportunity. What are the opportunities do you foresee from the current situation?
Well, despite the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic worldwide, there is a silver lining, and it's that the pandemic has given us an opportunity to transform tourism and to think about the type of sector that we want to leave to future. There is a crucial first step here, which is to acknowledge the impact that tourism has on our societies and also on the environment, and also acknowledge the need for a change, and then take concrete steps to achieve the goals that we want to address these issues. We also need to make sure that our proposed solutions have a long-lasting life, and we need to essentially turn this setback into a comeback. We need to revisit tourism strategies, and we need to stop ignoring the elephants in the room. We must think about how we can make people travel safely right now and in a more sustainable way. We also need to think about how the tourism industry can contribute positively to our society and to the environment. And we know that the recovery will be slow, and it will take time to get to where we want to be. But we know that this recovery will be a more powerful one, and especially if we all work together and learn from each other and support in terms of knowledge sharing to build a new tourism ecosystem.
Thank you, Jennifer. That's been very, very insightful. So, what is apparent to me from this talk is that never before, as never before, this organizations like yours, European Travel Commission, have a critical role to play, because countries and people are looking towards leadership, and they need comprehensive data and research, and to make very, very difficult decisions of what the future of travel and tourism could look like, and what the transformation, and that adaptation that you have touched upon could look like. So I think you have a critical role to play, and we thank you so much for doing that. Even organizations like ours, turn and look towards yourself, European Travel Commission, that what are the trends, what are the factors affecting what people's mindset at the moment, because there's no one crystal ball is going to serve all the answers. It's a multitude of various levels of information and data and research is what is required. So I thank you very much for your time, Jennifer. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.